We're live. We got the right slides. We're ready to go. Hi, my name is Bill Burnett. Again, I'm the Executive Director of the Design Program. We're going to talk about design thinking and applying it in the workplace. So the first thing I want to start with is sort of a quote from our senior academic person, David Kelly. David's also the founder of the D School, our Institute for Design Thinking here at Stanford, and prior to that was the founder of IDEO, which is probably one of the world's premier sort of innovation consultancies. And David is the big thinker behind the design thinking idea. We had been teaching design at Stanford for over 50 years. The design program that I run, which has both an undergraduate and a graduate degree program in it. You can get an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering and product design, and you can get a graduate degree in design, both from the Mechanical Engineering School. That program started in 1963, and we've been working in this very multidisciplinary, radical collaboration methodology for a long, long time. But in around 2004, 2005, David came up with the idea of moving our work into a wider domain of problem solving for everybody, sort of reframing it as a method of thinking, design thinking. And he's been quoted in his TED Talk and in his book on creative confidence and saying, we believe that the next generation of innovators and leaders need to be great design thinkers. And design thinking is just a way of solving problems. David will describe it often as just another tool in your tool belt. Just because you master the principles of design thinking doesn't mean that you give up on, using other powerful methods, scientific method, engineering thinking, and the methods of making decisions that you're taught in a sort of a business school or business kind of thinking. But design thinking works particularly well on large-scale, multidisciplinary problems where it's really difficult to get clear boundary conditions and lots of data. Typically, other methods of making decisions require that you have good data in order to make good decisions. In the case of design problems, you almost never have any data because you're really projecting and designing things that are going to occur in the future. And as we all know, you can't get data on stuff that hasn't happened yet. Anyway, we talk about the workplace. I want to sort of maybe demystify this with the potential of oversimplifying it. Work is just a place where people go every day, and it's organized typically around certain tasks that have to get done, certain vertical tasks like marketing, manufacturing, operations, design, engineering, research. And then it's organized around the skills that people have in those different domains. And really, if you break it down, the culture of any organization is just this collection of behaviors. What do we do when we get to work? Do we go to lots of planning and budget meetings? Do we go to lots of meetings where we talk about stuff? Or do we spend most of our time designing, building, creating? And if you're talking about transforming the way you work, and when we have the Master Series class on campus, I get a chance to meet with 60, 70 people almost every time, and they're all in different kinds of work environments, in the financial industry, in the design industries, in hospitality, in finance, you name it. And they talk to me about the things they do at work. And mostly they say that the stuff that they do at work doesn't feel as productive or as generative as it could be. And they're very interested in learning about design and design methods to sort of try to supercharge the innovation or just supercharge the environment. And so I always come back to, well, if you want to transform your work, what you're really saying is I want to do different things when I get there. So we're really talking about what are the behaviors that you're going to change and what are the skills that you'll employ with these new behaviors to kind of change the way work occurs for you. And, we think that you change those things by, first training yourself up on these new ideas like design thinking, and then essentially modeling these new behaviors. When you behave like a creative person, your staff, your team, other people see those behaviors and they want to emulate you, particularly if you're in a leadership position. So, creativity is not a very magical thing. It's actually a pretty simple thing to understand. all humans are naturally creative. We're tool makers and builders, by nature. Unfortunately, a lot of your education in the U.S. anyway has kind of beaten creativity out of you, and there may be bureaucratic structures or ways of working which also limit what you think is the possible scope of creative behaviors at your work. But I think if we just focus on these kind of ideas about what sort of behaviors do creative people use and what kind of mindsets do they engage in, and then we think about what you need to do to kind of learn those skills, we can have a pretty robust conversation about how do you transform your work environment. So design thinking is both a process and a series of mindsets. The design thinking process starts with empathy. We always say don't start with a problem, start with people. People are where the interesting data is, and people are an interesting thing to observe. Then we redefine the problem. We ideate, and ideation is just a general term for lots and lots of ways that we have of coming up with lots and lots of ideas. The theory being with the more ideas you have, the better your choices will be. And then we know that you can't just design in a vacuum, so we have a bias to action. We like to build stuff and test it, and build stuff and test it. And in that way, we kind of seek to understand the problem in a different way. Even if you don't use that process, you could think like a design thinker. You can think like we think, and that tends to be these 5 things: a bias to action. You'll notice in most design thinking workshops and in the training that we do here at Stanford, there's not a lot of planning, not a lot of PERT charting, not a lot of stuff that although it may be useful in certain domains when you're in the domain of innovation, planning sort of slows things down and comes up the work. So we have a bias to action. We tend to start with actions and then dissect the data we get from those actions. We believe in radical collaboration, which is truly collaboration across in organizations, across disciplines. Marketing, working with engineering, working with design, working with operations, working with the field, salespeople, all on the same team. We believe, that when you get lots and lots of people together that really speak different languages and come at the problems in a different way, you get innovative solutions, but you also get a lot of chaos because people don't know how to work together. And so we train people on the process as a kind of anchor to make sure that the team knows what they're doing and they're always mindful of how to move forward. Curiosity is probably the #1 mindset of a designer, and the idea of reframing problems, taking whatever the problem statement is and really flipping it upside down, expanding it, abstracting it, finding ways to approach the problem that expand the potential solution space. When I work with teams to come to the masterclass, I'm generally impressed with the smart and dedicated people that show up and want to do a good job and want to learn how to do things better. And my premise is if I took any 6 people and put them on a team and I gave them a problem, they're all smart and they're all motivated, and plus or minus a few degrees, if everybody's working on the same problem with a smart, motivated team, they're going to get a pretty good cluster of answers. But the answers will be clustered around some norm. The trick is if I give one team the design problem and say go, and I take the other team aside and I say, I'm going to give you some information those guys don't have. And the information will be a sort of a nuanced data set about users' preferences and opinions, users, where they get blocked, where they get unblocked, and kind of the kinds of things that might delight these users. I give that team that special information. They're going to come up with much better ideas just because they reframed the problem. Everybody else was working on the coffee cup, and they were working on creating the Starbucks experience, which is really a completely different problem. So when we talk about reframing, it's a super powerful tool. And we're going to get into that a little bit in this talk as we talk about, what we can actually accomplish in the next 20 minutes or so to talk about this process. So when people say, all right, just break it down for me in 5 minutes, what's this whole design thinking about? It's just remember 2 things. If you can't remember the whole thing and the 5 mindsets and the 5 steps and whatever, just remember 2 things: empathy and brainstorming. Empathy because we're going to start with people, not the problem. We're not going to solve the problem of building a better wheelbarrow, a better office chair, a better something. We're going to go out and look at people in offices and figure out what their behaviors are. We're going to go watch construction guys on a job site move stuff around and see how they do it. And then we're going to take that data and we're going to come up with lots and lots, I mean lots of ideas, hundreds of ideas, not one or two that we choose from, but literally hundreds that we choose from. And the ideas will be, because of the process we use, some will be close to existing solutions and some will be completely different solutions, completely reframing the problem. So if we're just going to focus on these for this talk right now, because I think it's where I can give you one or two tools that are instantaneously actionable in your organization, and with that kind of a brief intervention, maybe you can get something going that you'll find useful. So essentially, the empathy step is we steal from the tools of the anthropologists and ethnographers, and we do a lot of observation, and we ask lots of questions, and then we come back with all this sort of interesting observational data. We take videos of people. We ask them lots of questions, and we just observe we do what we call a moccasin walk. We just spend a day with our users to try to understand what's really going on. Users are interesting people. Of course, they're going to try to help you when you ask them questions, and they're actually going to try to please you and tell you the things that you want to hear. They're also going to tell you about the way that they think their job should be, not the way it actually is. They're going to tell you about the aspirational qualities of the problem they're working on and how good they're at it. But when you actually observe them and watch how they do all these little workarounds and how they have difficulties understanding, how the software really works or how the product really functions, you get a lot of information. But the thing that we find is that without sort of putting that information into a couple of different frameworks, it's really hard to decide what's actionable and what's not. So the one empathy framework that I think is the most accessible, and it's a pretty straightforward idea, is we have an overall framework, and this is just a chunk of it, where we put a 2x2 together where we go from concrete to abstract, and then on the horizontal axis, it's analysis on the left and synthesis on the right. And there's a complex method of filling out this framework. But the one I want to look at is when we're trying to get some insights from our observation. We have a couple of different techniques over in this top left quadrant. Digesting customer and user needs at the abstract level. We do a thing called an empathy map that I'm going to show you. And we use the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in a specific way to try to capture information and framework it in a way that we can do something with. We have a bunch of other techniques as well, but I'm not going to go into those right now. So this is a classic little diagram. I think it comes from the IDEO guys. And what you see on the left is sort of the external world of this mythical user. What you see on the right is the internal world of this user. And here's the sort of truism. When you go out in the world and you talk to people who are using your products and you want to come up with better ideas for your products or your services, your financial services, whatever the experiences that you've designed for your customers, all you can really get out of them is you can observe what they do, their actual behaviors, the way in which they work and work around problems that they have, and you can talk to them and you can hear what they say. But we never believe that what they say and what they do is actually what's going on. We believe that what's really going on is what they're thinking, the thoughts behind the way they framed what they say, including trying to please you or trying to look better than they really are. And then what they do is really not, so it's just really, their behaviors are really driven by their feelings. And a lot of times there's a mismatch between what someone feels about a situation and what they say about a situation. So a very simple framework that tends to really open up this design space and really be productive is this simple little 2x2. You go out in the world and you write down on a sticky note or in your notebook all the things you saw people doing. Let's say we were talking about we're the wheelbarrow company, we want a new wheelbarrow. First of all, you'd never ask for a new wheelbarrow because that's a wheelbarrow is a solution, not a problem. The problem is how do we move stuff around the job site and get it to where people need it when they need it on time. It's always delivered, to the edge of the job site on a big pallet. All the bricks are over there, but the bricklayers are somewhere else. So you never frame the problem around the solution, which is the wheelbarrow. You just say, how do we move stuff around? So you go out on a job site and you watch what people do. You watch how they move stuff around, and sometimes they use wheelbarrows, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they come up with very creative ways of, jury rigging wheelbarrows to do things they were never intended to do. And then you interview them and you find out what they say about what they're doing. But then the design team takes those observations, and maybe you've had 3 or 4 people go out and do 3 or 4 different observations. So then you write them all down on Post-it notes, and you cluster them in the do column and in the say column. And maybe some things overlap. Maybe some things are completely contradictory. People said completely different things. Different users had completely different needs. So you cluster those on the left side of the diagram. And then the insight part, the creative part, is now you have to sort of make a guess. It's truly a guess. We call it design intuition. That's what they said. But what were they really thinking? I'm sure you've had this experience where people have said something, but it really came from a deeper internal story or thought. So when you break down the observations this way, you find that on the right-hand side, if you figure out guess what they're thinking and guess what they're actually feeling. The feelings are the emotions surrounding things. The feelings have to do with how the behaviors are mapped into their internal world. For instance, I think one of the things, I was at Apple for 7 years working on the notebooks that Apple did in the early and mid-90s. Our observation, the general observation that Apple's built around, is that technology makes people feel stupid. You're using a Windows machine or some other kind of an Android machine nowadays or something, and you're trying to get a simple task done, like somebody asked me what's Ryan's phone number while I'm on a call with Corinne, and I got to look up his phone number while I'm simultaneously talking. And on every other phone on the planet, what would you do? You would say, well, I'm probably going to hang up on you, but I'll give it a try. And then you try to sort through menus, and you would hang up on the person. And the phone would make you both feel inadequate and stupid because it was clearly your fault, not the phone's fault, that you couldn't find the data you wanted. And you took that feeling and internalized it as a sort of overall sense that I'm not good at technology. When that's the key. Once you discover that story, that feeling, and what's going on behind the actions, you realize, oh, I can make you fall in love with my product if I don't make you feel stupid, if I make you feel powerful. And so all of Apple's work is really, just focused around that idea of putting the power in the hands of the user and making the actions so transparent that you don't have to learn them. You just know how to do them, right? So looking up a phone number on an iPhone with a big graphic screen and the numbers, scrolling at the end of a simple touch interaction, you never feel stupid. So you can use empathy mapping as a general case for whatever observations you've made, and the insights come from looking at the thoughts and the feelings that you can apply from the actions and the words. Another way to map things sort of according to the human need. Again, we don't start with a problem, we start with the people. So we go out and we talk to bricklayers and carpenters and stuff on the job site, or we talk to cell phone users. We have a theory that every action, every interaction, every product actually touches on all 5 levels of the hierarchy of needs. This is, Abraham Maslow's work from a long time ago. I think current psychology indicates that although he thought this was a hierarchy and you needed to fulfill psychological safety, love and belonging needs before you could fulfill esteem or self-actualization, that we now know that that's not true. You can actually still be struggling with your basic safety and physiological needs. You can be very, very poor, but still be executing art at a very high level in order to create self-actualization. But our theory in using this is that you just take any action you've seen and you map it against all of the layers, because every action has something to do with how you feel about yourself. Every action has something to do with creating, some sort of sense of safety, either psychological or physical. And every action that you do, particularly when you're interacting with products or services, can create senses of self-esteem, create senses of belonging. What are brands? Brands are just, things you belong to. You belong to you buy Levi's, you don't buy Wranglers. You buy Apple, you don't buy Dell. You buy, you like Disney, you don't like Nickelodeon. So, you're always belonging to something in the consumer culture, and it's always around some kind of a need. And oftentimes, the only observations you have maybe are in one or two of these frameworks or one of the two of these layers, but what you do is you then do that design intuition thing, that creative leap to say, well, how does this tool that the carpenter's using actually create self-actualization and self-esteem for the carpenter when it looks like it's simply just about, creating a easier way to do a task. And those conceptual leaps often, again, just like with the empathy map, unlock a possible observation or at least a point of view that you can now prototype, test, and see what new innovation will come out of it. So basically what both of these frameworks do is they're arguing that in every product, in every interaction, in every service or experience that you offer your customer or consumer, whether it's designed or not, it's an experience that has touch points, it's an experience that they go through, and that it is not simply the rationalization of I wanted something, you provided it, I bought the product or service, I used it, we're done. It's always about the internal state, the emotional state of the user. And since you cannot observe, people don't have glass heads and they don't tell you what their emotional inner state is all about, you become expert, again, using the tools of ethnography, observation, putting yourself, in an empathetic situation, walking in their shoes, doing what they do. You put yourself in a situation to understand the emotional needs that are behind the physical or observable actions. And once you've understood that, using these frameworks, a whole bunch of new ideas become possible. And then you use the brainstorming and prototyping and testing process to see which of your insights turn out to prove true. So although those two frameworks are pretty simple, say do versus think feel, put things on the hierarchy of needs, they're actually, we notice most people don't do those unless they're trained in design thinking. They execute a functional solution, but they don't execute a solution that delights or engages the user in a deep way. I teach in the design school. I teach engineers how to do great design. We do come from a sort of, strict design tradition. Form does follow function the way we teach it. But remember, the form follows function. One of the functions of objects in our built world, particularly in the technological world, where objects can be increasingly difficult and opaque and hard to use, one of the functions of objects is to delight us. One of the functions of objects is to be beautiful, so that our built world is a beautiful place. It's not simply the old Bauhaus Germanic notion that function was strictly the mechanical function of the product to resolve the need of the strict usage, because there is no such thing with human beings as it's just the usage. It's always about how the person feels. And so when you open up your design process to the empathy step, it really changes the information you have to design with. And we find that that's one of the major things that leads to innovation. Okay, so if you're the team that's got all this new data about how users think and feel and what they actually, how the product, even the simplest little product, contributes to their self-actualization or self-knowledge and an awareness and a projection of themselves in the world as competent and intelligent people. Now you got to come up with lots of ideas. And here's the other, it's just, again, when I only have a little bit of time, this is the other one I hit on. And particularly brainstorming. We have lots of techniques for ideation, but particularly I want to talk about brainstorming because so many people do it so wrong, and then they don't get the results they want, and then they blame brainstorming as the process. And the studies on brainstorming that have said brainstorming doesn't work are flawed in a number of ways. But brainstorming can really not work when you don't do it correctly or you don't do it well. But when it is done properly, it creates the opportunity to generate hundreds of ideas. And number one thing we see when we're working with startups, when we're working with large companies, it doesn't matter the scale. People grab the first idea or the first couple of ideas and run with them. And 99 out of 100 times, those first couple of ideas are the things that are available to you. They're the things you know how to do. And so by definition, they're not innovations. They're line extensions, they're small increments on the existing ideas or products, but by definition, they're the first thing that was available to you, to your thinking, or to the team's thinking, and they are not innovative enough. And people truncate the process because they want to get into implementation. Implementation always feels good, even when you're implementing the wrong thing. People just love, organizations love to see action. Action looks like implementation. And over again, we see people implementing essentially mediocre ideas with gusto, and then wondering why, they didn't move the bar on the sales needle or on the innovation needle. So here's what we say. Brainstorming is this complicated thing. It's really about the mind-body relationship. It's about engaging more intelligence than just your intellectual intelligence. You have kinesthetic intelligence. You have emotional intelligence, which we were just talking about. The whole empathy piece is about amplifying the emotional intelligence and information in that spectrum. You have information about cultural things. You have information about physical things. All of that gets employed in a robust brainstorming process. And I like to use the analogy to jazz because if you think about what a jazz ensemble does, it gets together and it innovates in the moment. It tries to play songs in a way that's never been played before, but everybody's playing the same song and everybody's trying to sort of solve the same problem. And I love this analogy because when I see people getting together for brainstorming and they aren't prepping properly or they're not assembling the team properly, it sort of feels to me kind of like a jazz ensemble that's disorganized, right? So I happen to be a jazz fan. Kind of Blue is the best-selling jazz album of all time. It was an all-star cast pulled together by Miles Davis, Bill Evans on piano, Jimmy Cobb on drums, Paul Chambers, Cannonball Adderley, John Coltrane, Miles Davis. These were the titans of jazz in that era, and when they came together, they were able to create something that nobody had ever created before, and just kind of blow the socks off of the jazz world. Now imagine, I say, hey, Ryan, let's get together and play some jazz. And you've never played a saxophone before, but here's your saxophone. And Corinne, here's your I want you to play drums, and I want you to sit in with Bill Evans and Miles Davis. It's going to be pretty impossible for you to even play the instrument, much less get to the level where you can play the instrument. So the mechanics disappear, and what you're actually doing is playing off of the other musicians and expanding and growing the ideas, that are being presented musically in the moment, in a temporal framework. You got to stay on track on the music. You can't stop the music in the middle and go, what note am I supposed to play now? So the mechanics of brainstorming are exactly identical to the mechanics of great jazz. You have to be expert at your instrument. Your instrument's your brain. You have to be willing to be free and connected in the moment to every idea that's on the table. And you have to be able to respond, without internal criticism or external criticism. And your goal is to make something happen that you had no idea of when you started. And so the mechanics of this are difficult, and even perfect mechanics do not make great improvisation. I know lots of people who are great, mechanical musicians who cannot improvise. And partly this is a 10,000-hour problem. I see people sitting down to brainstorm, and they don't do it very much, and they haven't done it a lot, and they've not really ever gotten past a sort of novice stage of improvisation. If you believe in the 10,000 hours to mastery, I'm going to argue that if you haven't done, really good structured brainstorming with facilitation to make sure that you're doing it well for at least 100 hours, you're still not even competent. And to move from competent to expert is probably going to take you 1,000 hours. So even if you brainstorm 3 hours a week, every week on your job, right, that's only going to get you 150 hours. And so when you sit down to brainstorm, make sure you're brainstorming with people who are at least expert or at least competent at this, so that you have the opportunity to take the combined competencies and create some music nobody's ever heard before. So this discipline of letting go and inventing in the moment really takes quite a bit of practice. It's not as simple as people make it out. It's not just sitting in a room tossing out ideas. That's not making music. So brainstorming is effective, but it works in a couple of unique ways. One, the session that you have generates ideas in itself. And if you do it correctly, the session isn't over until you've sorted and ranked those ideas. But the session is also fodder for later thinking. Whatever came up in the session still exists as sort of a live discussion that happens even after. And so oftentimes when people measure the output of brainstorming sessions, they're not measuring what happens 24, 48, and 72 hours later. And the other big thing about brainstorming, its impact on your work process is today we come in and brainstorm. Monday is the day we do brainstorm. We do really structured brainstorming. We do 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. That's really different than today is the day we come in and do planning. Today is the day we come in and do budgeting. It's a different behavior. And once it becomes a normal behavior, a normative behavior in your organization, you've started to move the organization from saying clearly the most important thing we do in the organization is what we spend the most time on, right? So if we spend the most time on planning, it must be that we're not a product organization. We're a planning organization. There's a great quote from the former CEO of Ford, Alan Mulally, who came from one of the young engineers at Ford. He said, culture eats process for lunch. And he was talking to this young engineer. He said, what do you mean by that? He says, well, when I joined Ford, I thought I was joining a car culture. I wanted to design cars. I wanted to talk about the Mustang. I wanted to talk about cars. I've been here 3 years. I've been in planning meetings, tollgate meetings. I've been in lots of meetings, but in none of these meetings have we ever talked about a car. So clearly we're not a car culture. And just do a quick assessment around your own organization. Take your calendar from last week, add up the amount of time you did different activities, planning, budgeting, creative, innovative activities and other things. And the thing you spent the most time on is the thing that evidently your organization values the most because that's where it's spending all the time and money. When you change out some of those behaviors for brainstorming, a new norm is established and a shift in the culture is established because you're saying something else has value. But the other real reason brainstorming hasn't been as effective maybe in some places as it could be is that it's not really kind of doing it the way we think you should do it. Brainstorming actually has 4 parts to it. Only one part is the brainstorming session. Most people skip the other 3. So here are the 4 parts. Framing the problem, warming up the actual brainstorm, which is what everybody says they're doing, even though they don't necessarily do it that well, but that's the thing. And then they tend to stop right there, and then they don't do the next step, which is grouping and selecting ideas. So you got to frame a good problem, right? Framing is actually really the reframing thing. It's the coming up with something that's open-ended enough so that a large number of ideas can exist under that question, but setting a goal without describing the solution, saying how can I move bricks or construction materials from here to there on a job site is a very different question than how do I make a better wheelbarrow. Making a wheelbarrow is a noun, and the noun is always a solution. Reframed question, a good question for a brainstorm is always about an action or a verb. If you have a noun in your framing question, you've described a solution, and it's not going to work. It's not a subtle difference. It's actually a huge difference. The difference between saying designing wheelbarrows and getting more versions of the noun versus designing a new method or process for transporting materials, completely different problem. So you want to ask an open-ended question, use a verb, not a noun. But if you're too abstract, nothing happens. And we also see people saying, trying to, boil the ocean, solve world peace, make everybody happy. Those aren't questions that you can get any traction on. That's like you're trying to improvise the jazz, but you haven't picked a song yet. You need a song. You need something that focuses the energy of the group. But the big errors are either making it too big or making it actually brainstorming the solution, not the problem. Warming up. People are going to come from the budget meeting, or they're going to come from. Right now, it's finals week at Stanford pretty soon, so never try to brainstorm during finals week because people's brains are just not in that mode right then. But you do need to move people from their analytic mind to their synthetic mind, from their critical, focused attention, which is a powerful thing to have in business, to a non-judgmental, open focus, which is a powerful thing to have when you're trying to do innovation. And that's not a transition that's made easily. We tend to do warm-up exercises. We steal a lot from improv comedy. We steal a lot from theater. We steal a lot just from, like if you come to most D-school classrooms, it almost looks like a kindergarten because we have Play-Doh and popsicle sticks and pipe cleaners and construction paper and little scissors. But we get people in a building mode. We give them clay and we have them play. And we do other things to sort of move them out of their critical to their analytic or to their non-judgmental synthesis focus. In the brainstorm itself, we find that if you have a central facilitator who's writing down all the ideas, it goes too slowly. Typically, a brainstorming team is 3 to 5. Don't go much more than 5 or 6, or you just can't get enough conversation going rapidly enough. Think about it. You never see improvisational jazz groups that are bigger than 6. By the time they get to 8, 12, 14, it's not really improvisational anymore. They're playing off a score. You got to be able to see each other and react to each other. So, in human beings, that's about a 5-person circle, no bigger than that. But in order for that to be very generative and for there to be lots of ideas, everybody has to be able to write down and post their own. So they write them and post them in rapid sequence, and that gets rid of the bottleneck of the facilitator. And then we have the rules. You got to defer judgment. You got to go for volume. Stay on track one conversation at a time. The more you draw, the more visual you are, the better. Headline, which just means describe the idea really quickly and let somebody else get their idea. Don't say it's a wheelbarrow that has a motor and the motor has this other thing on it and it's got a transmission with, just say motorized wheelbarrow and go. You want to build off the idea of others and stay on topic. You've heard all these things before, encourage wild ideas. Let me tell you why they're there and why they work. You defer judgment because the number one thing that crushes human creativity is fear. You're afraid you'll be called out to be stupid. You're afraid you'll say something that's offensive. You're afraid you'll say something that's so weird that people will look at you funny. And if we don't make a safe space and disconnect the fear motivation, you'll pre-censor ideas even before you know you've had them. Literally, things won't even come into consciousness because you'll be in a state of fear. We measure people in a brain scanner, and we notice the amygdala is firing. We notice the fight or flight or freeze response is firing. When that is happening, it is almost impossible to be creative. So you've got to defer judgment and let people feel safe in order to have the kinds of ideas that you want to have. You're visual because you want to give voice to nonverbal thinking. About 60% of your brain is a visual processor. A lot of ideas show up as images, but they can't be put into words. So sketching is a great way to have more ideas. It doesn't matter how well you sketch, just crazy little cartoons are better than really elaborate sketches. Building on the ideas of others lowers this ownership barrier. So if we're all having ideas and I'm allowed to build on top of Ryan's ideas or Corinne's ideas, it's fine. It wasn't my idea in the first place, so I'm not attached to it. I'm not going to be afraid if it's too crazy. It was Ryan's crazy idea, not mine. I just made it weirder. And I like the idea of encouraging stealing. I mean, this is the one place where if you don't have an idea, just wait for somebody else to have an idea. That's what happens in a jazz group. Miles Davis starts playing a riff from, Somewhere My Prince Will Come, and then somebody else starts playing Surrey with the Fringe on top, and the two on top of those things, and somebody comes on top of that with another riff or another notion of a song. And that whole thing is what's the beautiful thing. It's not just the one idea at a time. You've probably been in brainstorms, which aren't bad, where everybody has one idea at a time. We call those popcorn brainstorms. So everything, the ideas just explode randomly from the center of the group. When you use a yes and methodology out of improv, the ideas get better and better, much faster. And encouraging wild ideas because there's always groupthink in any group. There's always the sort of stereotypical thinking. People show up at a brainstorming session with a whole bunch of ideas they've already had, and they want to tell you those ideas. Great. Let them get those are typically the ideas I refer to as the junk people come with. Great. Get them all on the board, post them all, and then go way beyond those, right? David Kelly's, famous for saying, look, if you don't go beyond the normal, you can't come back to anything innovative. So you don't know you've gone across the line until you're way across the line. And so we'll change up brainstorming. So we're saying, imagine there's no gravity and we're on the moon, or imagine you're a purple elephant. How would you solve this problem? We're just looking for crazy ideas, not that we're going to execute those, but that those will stimulate ideas farther from the center that can be made actionable. So that's why we have those things. Now, here's the thing. This is the one that just kills me. People go in a room. Maybe they even warm up. Maybe they brainstorm fantastically. Beautiful music has been made. But somebody forgot to turn on the tape recorder, so we have no record of it at all. What actually happens mostly is people take a picture of the whiteboard. There's all these Post-its on the whiteboard. And it's like, yeah, I'll take a picture of the whiteboard. And that's where ideas go to die. They live on cell phone cameras, pictures of hundreds of Post-its on a whiteboard, and nobody does anything with them. So it's perfectly reasonable for your boss to say, I think this was a waste of time. What did you guys accomplish? Oh, we had a bunch of ideas. Boss, was really great. We had a lot of fun. You know, we had candy and we did this fun warm-up improv thing. And it's like, well, what happened? So you don't want to be judging during the brainstorm, but right after the brainstorm is the perfect time to group and select ideas that look promising. Now, here's the deal. If you just select, first, lots of ideas overlap, and so one of the reasons you put them on Post-its, you can kind of cluster all the ideas about changing the way the field service organization works and cluster all the other ideas about the way, wheelbarrows have 2 wheels or 5 wheels or 10 wheels. And then you start overlaying, some questions on the ideas. Because what you want to walk away with when your boss says, what happened in the brainstorming session is, we had 142 ideas. We down-selected those into 6 categories that we think, have something to do with our business model. We've got one wild card category that we think has got the most innovative stuff in it, and we down-selected from that to 5 things we want to prototype and try with customers. That gets you promoted. That kind of, talking about what happened in the brainstorm is how you make it proactive and useful. And here's the deal. If you just select for the ideas that are feasible, you're back to doing the stuff that you knew you could do before you got in the room. So you got to pick a different selection criteria. We particularly like most delightful, because delightful brings in the customer's voice, brings in that thing that's going to just make somebody go, oh, I got to have that. I didn't know I wanted that, but I got to have that. Now, there's a rumor that Apple does no research or market stuff. It's not true. Apple does more research with customers than anybody on the planet. They don't ask customers if they should do a phone, but they do, once they get their idea to do a phone, they research the heck out of it, because they are after that delightful customer experience, that experience where you didn't even know you wanted the darn thing. As soon as you see it and try it, you have to have it. So grouping and selecting is critical. Pick a criteria that makes sense. The takeaways are, if you change the way you work and you change the time you spend on these new behaviors, you will actually change the outcomes of work and also everybody's experience of it. Things you focus on: practicing empathy that leads to insights, and move to the jazz brainstorming model, I like to call it. And then if you personally model the behavior you want from your team, you act differently and you reward differently, you're going to discover that work is transforming itself into a much more creative and innovative experience. And by the way, it takes about 8 weeks to create a new behavior. The behavioral psychologists tell us. I'm 7 weeks into my new diet. I'm not sure I'm there yet. But it does take a while to transform behaviors in organizations. But if you just act the way you think everybody should act, pretty soon they will change their behaviors to be what you're looking for. Well, there's a couple that are pretty tactical, and let me answer those first. Question came in through. We have a facilitator while brainstorming, and I think my recommendation is you always have someone who's organized the brainstorm. You always have Miles Davis. We're going to play this song. We're going to work on this problem, and the person who actually is very careful about selecting that multidisciplinary team that's going to brainstorm together. So that's what the facilitator's role is. They're not the bottleneck in the idea having or idea recording. So everybody should be putting things together, writing their own ideas down on Post-its and posting it individually. But yeah, there is typically a person who calls the session and organizes and does the framing and organizing of ideas at the end, and a report out to whoever the stakeholders are. Can I give you an example of a kind of insights that are realized from the empathy effort? Well, here's the thing. I always say you don't start with the problem, you start with people. But of course, everybody just starts with a problem. Even at the D School, we have a class called Entrepreneurial Design for Extreme Affordability, where we're trying to work on the big questions: poverty, infant mortality, food supply, particularly in the developing world. And there was a team that was given a problem to go to Nepal and design really inexpensive, low-cost incubators, because incubators, U.S. incubators, made in the technological world are $40, $50, $60, $70,000 things. And there was a theory that that the third world or the developing nations couldn't afford incubators, so we needed a low-cost one. Design a $100 incubator or a $500 incubator. So this team got all together, used their design thinking skills, went over to the Stanford ICU unit, looked at how incubators and premature babies, are connected, came up with some plans, and then they flew to Nepal. When they got there, the doctor they were supposed to be working with said, well, these are really dumb ideas, and you don't understand the problem. Come with me. And he took them to the room where the babies would be kept. And he said, what do you notice in this room? And they said, well, you have lots of incubators. He says, yeah, I can get incubators donated anytime I want. That's not the problem. What else do you notice? And one of the kids finally said, where are all the babies? And he goes, yeah, there's no babies in the hospital. Babies aren't born in hospitals in Nepal. They're born in villages. Come with me. 8 hours in a Jeep down a dusty road to a village where they met 3 women who had just, in the last 6 months lost their babies. And they realized, 1, they had the wrong problem. 2, they needed to talk to these women and find out what was really going on. What was really going on is because of bad prenatal care, low birth weight babies are born. Low birth weight just means they're compromised in that they can't regulate their body temperature. The reason they need to be in an incubator is simply because if they aren't kept warm, they literally die of hypothermia. Completely reframe the problem. That's the Embrace company. They started a company out of this. They make an infant, essentially a sleeping bag that you can tuck an infant in. You boil a particular chemical in a pot of water. You stick that in the sleeping bag, and you can keep an infant warm at body temperature for the 8 to 12 hours it takes to get to a hospital. But just recognizing, 1, that the problem was incorrectly framed, 2, that they were willing to break out of the framing of the NGO that they were working with, 3, just actually talking to the women and finding out, well, their first designs were little boxes, and the women said, no, that looks like a coffin. I'm not going to put my baby in that. And then it was like, you can't just take the baby to the hospital. You got to take the baby, the mom, and the whole family to the hospital because it's not like she's going to drop the kids at daycare. That doesn't exist. So the whole iteration of that design and really understanding who the user was, took 9 months to a year. They've shipped hundreds of thousands of these baby sleeping bags and saved, they believe, hundreds of thousands of babies in the process. Last one, if you want to promote this to your boss, how do you get people to want to try something like this? There was also a question about incentives. What do you have to do for incentives? So organizations are just like people. They're fearful. You need to lower fear. The way you lower fear as a boss is you change the incentives because your team's going to fail. It's going to fail a lot when they're trying to do innovation. The whole notion of innovation is to do something that's never been done before. What do you think the success rate on that is? Well, if you're a venture capitalist and you're famous in the Valley, your success rate is 1 in 10. So if you're not willing to act like a venture capitalist, you're not ready for innovation, would be one argument. So what the boss can do at his level is change the incentive. We actually do incentives for failure, for what we call good failures, failures that you learn a lot from that are highly generative. So that's what a boss can do. How do you convince a boss to try this stuff? It's almost always you pick a small project that's not on the critical path. It might even just be, let's redesign how we do purchase orders around here, or let's redesign how we do expense reports around here, because it's such a pain in the ass, right? Pick something that's not critical path, demonstrate that a team can work this way, and that through a series of prototypes, asking interesting questions, that you actually get to a more interesting problem than the problem of, expense reports. And once you've demonstrated it successfully in a couple of small things, you'll be given permission to do something bigger. Almost always we find when just organizations flip from a planning-based organization to a design thinking or creativity-based organization, it comes because somebody up top was willing to give a team a little bit of leeway to try and fail and give them some air cover, some protection from the rest of the organization. But that a team kind of took it on themselves to transform their behavior. So you have this little cell of new behavior that starts to be successful and starts to create some recognition in the organization for the way they're solving problems. But they were protected in their early days by some visionary manager or boss who can cover for them while they're doing strange things like innovation. I think that's all the time we have for questions. We went a little bit over. Apologize for that. I'm going to turn it back to Corinne.
Thank you for joining us today. If you have any follow-up questions, we will be sending out a recording of this session within a week, and you can reply to us there with additional inquiries in regards to the program as well as any other follow-up questions. Thanks again. Bye-bye.